Imagine a show that promises you everything: gorgeous costumes, sweeping romance, a world that looks like a Jane Austen novel but feels nothing like one because the people in it look like all of us. A show that says, whoever you are, there's a love story here for you. That was the promise of Bridgerton when it first appeared on Netflix on Christmas Day 2020. And for a lot of people, it delivered. Within a month, 82 million households had watched it. It became the 5th largest Netflix launch in the platform's history at that point. Within the period drama genre, it was a genuine revolution. But 4 seasons in, something has shifted. The fandom is fractured, book readers are frustrated, LGBTQ+ audiences are cautiously excited but watching carefully. BIPOC fans are exhausted and angry in ways that go well beyond plot. And everyone, it seems, has an opinion about a character named Michaela Sterling, who used to be called Michael. This video is not a takedown of Bridgerton. It is not a defense of it either. What it is an honest reckoning with what happens when a show built on a specific set of promises starts making different ones, and what it costs and who pays that cost when those changes are not handled with the care they require. Let's start at the beginning. Part 1. What the books actually are. Before we can talk about what Bridgerton the show changed, we need to understand what Bridgerton the books actually are and why they matter to the people who love them. Julia Quinn began publishing the Bridgerton series in 2000. There are 8 novels, one for each of the 8 Bridgerton siblings, released over 6 years. They are unapologetically Regency romance, set in the early 19th century, filled with balls and titles, and the rigid social hierarchies of the British ton, and structured around the pursuit of the perfect marriage match. Each book focuses on a different sibling and the person they fall in love with. They are warm, witty, often funny, occasionally melodramatic, and built around one core guarantee: a happily ever after. The books have an all-white cast. That is not a small detail. It is simply the world Julia Quinn wrote, consistent with the conventions of the genre at the time. When Shondaland and Netflix adapted them for television, they made the most significant change of all before a single episode had aired. They built a racially diverse world using a fixated British high society: Black aristocrats, South Asian love interests, a Black duke, a Black queen. The show was, from the outset, a reimagining rather than a straight adaptation. That choice, which was bold and largely celebrated, set a template. Bridgerton was not going to be precious about the source material. It was going to use the books as a foundation and build something new on top of them. And for many viewers, especially those who had never seen themselves in period romance, that was a revelation. But it also created a tension that has never fully resolved. Because when you tell book fans that their beloved series is being adapted, they come with expectations. And when you then start making substantial changes, some of them creative and some of them arguably ideological, you're playing a complicated game between 2 audiences who do not always want the same things. That tension is what this video is really about. Part 2. Season 1, Where It All Began. Season 1 adapts The Duke and I, the first Bridgerton novel following eldest daughter Daphne and Simon Bassett, the Duke of Hastings, as their fake courtship becomes real. The central conflict is Simon's vow never to father children, a promise made in anguish to his dying, abusive father, and Daphne's desperate desire for a family. Most of the season's changes from the book are minor, and some are improvements. In the book, Daphne is in her 2nd social season and is somewhat ordinary, a friendly girl nobody falls in love with. On screen, she is a flawless diamond of the first water, fighting off suitors because her overprotective brother scares them away. It is a cleaner dramatic engine. Queen Charlotte, who does not exist in the books, was invented entirely for the show and became one of its most beloved characters. Prince Frederick, Daphne's secondary suitor, was also invented. These additions work, but Season 1 also carries the most genuinely controversial change in the entire run of the show, and it is one that many viewers have chosen to gloss over: Simon and Daphne's wedding night conflict. In Julia Quinn's book, Simon is drunk, impaired, and not in full control of his faculties when Daphne uses his physical state to try to conceive without his knowledge or consent. It is, even by the standards of the romance genre, a deeply troubling scene. The show attempted to soften this by having Simon be conscious, and the encounter begin consensually, with Daphne then shifting positions in a way Simon cannot control. Creator Chris Van Dusen said the show was trying to put the scene in the context of a world where women had no power and no reproductive autonomy. The reading of that framing is charitably complicated. The showrunners took a scene that was already ethically fraught in the book and chose to keep the core action while changing the framing around it. Many viewers felt that the show had not so much resolved the problem as relocated it. It remains one of the most debated choices in the whole adaptation. The other significant Season 1 change was revealing Lady Whistledown's identity at the end of the season. In Julia Quinn's novels, Whistledown's identity is the mystery of the entire series, not revealed until the 4th book. On screen, the decision to pull that secret forward was made to give Nicola Coughlin's Penelope a substantial arc much earlier than the books allow. It paid off enormously for Penelope's character, but it also changed the show's fundamental structure. Once Whistledown is known, the narrative operates differently for everyone watching. Part 3, Season 2, Kanthony, Kate, and the Quiet Sideline. Season 2 adapts The Viscount Who Loved Me and introduces Kate Sharma and her younger sister Edwina, played by Simone Ashley and Charithra Chandran. In the original book, the sisters are called the Sheffields and are white. Their transformation into South Asian women named the Sharmas was one of the show's most visible casting choices, and one that generated genuine excitement among South Asian viewers who had rarely seen themselves at the center of a Regency romance. The adaptation itself is largely faithful. The famous bee sting scene in which Kate is stung and Anthony, who is terrified of bees because one killed his father, has to calm down rather than the book's more awkward version, where he attempts to suck the venom out, was transformed into one of the show's most genuinely beautiful moments. Kate placing Anthony's hand on her chest so he can feel her heartbeat is a scene the books could never have delivered in the same way. But Season 2 also introduced what would become a recurring and painful pattern. Simone Ashley was the female lead of the season. She was the top-billed love interest. And yet, in the promotional campaign for Season 2, Netflix consistently framed the season around the ensemble rather than centering Ashley as the star. There was also no wedding scene for Kate and Anthony. The show's director at the time explained that 2 wedding spectacles back-to-back would have been too much. They watched Edwina's near wedding as the season's ceremonial centerpiece, and Kate and Anthony simply cut to their honeymoon. For the show's only female lead of South Asian heritage, there was no formal celebration, no moment of cultural visibility through a ceremony, no equivalent of what Daphne and Simon had in Season 1. These were the details BIPOC fans noticed, and they filed them away. Part 4, The Order Breaks. Colin before Benedict. One of the quieter controversies in the Bridgerton fandom involves the show's decision to depart from the book order. Julia Quinn's 8 novels follow the siblings in birth order: Anthony first, then Benedict, then Colin, then Daphne, though she is actually in the first book. The point is, the siblings tell their stories in a sequence. The show skipped Benedict, the second eldest son, and went directly to Colin, the third, for Season 3. Benedict's story would have to wait until Season 4. Showrunner Jess Brownell explained the choice by noting that the show had been seeding Penelope and Colin's relationship since Season 1, making the build-up feel natural and earned. Nicola Coughlan, who plays Penelope, described it as the right moment for the story, and from a narrative standpoint, that argument holds. The Penelope and Colin arc had been one of the show's most lovingly developed background stories. Season 3, meanwhile, was its own complex case. The Polin season received an extraordinary level of promotional investment, a global world tour, a drone light show. Netflix tripled its brand partners for Season 3 compared to any previous season. Nicola Coughlan and Luke Newton were flown around the world, from Australia to Warsaw to Rio de Janeiro, to meet fans and build the season's cultural momentum. This was wonderful for them. It was wonderful for fans who love Polin, but it was impossible to watch without thinking about Season 2. Where Simone Ashley, the show's first female lead of color in the central romance, received no comparable treatment. Ashley and Jonathan Bailey reportedly had to fund their own production wrap party because no budget was provided for it. That is not an insignificant detail. The biggest creative change in Season 3, however, had nothing to do with the book it was adapting. At the end of the season's finale, Francesca's husband John introduces his cousin, and the cousin is a woman named Michaela Sterling. In Julia Quinn's 6th novel, When He Was Wicked, the cousin's name is Michael. He is a man. He and Francesca fall in love after John's death. The love story is built on grief, on guilt, on the impossible complexity of falling for the person who is both the closest connection to someone you lost and the exact person you should not want. Michaela, as introduced on screen at the end of Season 3, is all of those things, and also something more. Part 5, Michael to Michaela, the change that changed everything. Let's be precise about what the Michael to Michaela gender swap actually involves, because the details matter. In Julia Quinn's When He Was Wicked, Michael Sterling is John's cousin and best friend. When John dies suddenly, leaving Francesca a childless widow, Michael is there. He has been secretly in love with Francesca for years, a love he suppressed out of loyalty to John, and that he carries with profound guilt. The novel is, structurally, one of the darkest in the series. It is about grief that does not resolve cleanly, about desire that carries shame, about two people who come to love each other through the wreckage of a loss that should have kept them apart. The emotional architecture of that story does not fundamentally change when Michael becomes Michaela. What changes is the nature of the desire between the characters. Francesca, who in the books is a woman who falls in love with a man, is now falling in love with a woman. That transforms her arc from a standard Regency heterosexual romance into a queer love story. And in a genre that has almost never centered queerness in its leading couple, the significance of that shift, done on the scale that Bridgerton operates at, is genuinely enormous. She told an outlet that making an entire Bridgerton season about a sapphic relationship feels huge, noting that while many shows have depicted queer love, doing it as the central leading romance of a franchise of this scale is a genuinely different statement. And she is not wrong. This is significant for queer viewers, particularly those who grew up reading romance novels where they did not exist. The idea of a Bridgerton season built entirely around a queer happily ever after is meaningful in a way that is hard to overstate. But then there is the other side of this. Book fans of the Francesca and Michael story are upset. And their upset is real, even if some of the expressions of that upset are completely unacceptable. They are not upset because they oppose queer representation. They are upset because the specific story they loved, the one where a man carries a forbidden love in secret for years because of loyalty to his cousin, the one where the guilt and the grief and the desire are all tangled together in a specifically heterosexual context, the one where a woman in the Regency era has to struggle with childbearing difficulties, is not the story being told anymore. That story has been changed at a fundamental level. There is also the narrative consequence for Eloise. Julia Quinn's books follow the siblings in order. Eloise is 5th, and her story is next. The show has confirmed she will lead Season 6. But this means Eloise, one of the most beloved characters in the entire run of the show, articulate and complicated and resistant to the marriage mart in ways that resonated deeply with viewers, is sitting out yet another season. She has been in the background since Season 1. She will be in the background through Season 5. That is a long time to ask fans to wait for a character they care deeply about. Part 6, Masali Baduza and the weight nobody warned her about. Here's the part of this conversation that requires its own section, because it is being buried in the noise of the other debates. Masali Baduza, the actress who plays Michaela, is a dark-skinned black woman. And in the backlash to the Francesca and Michaela announcement, the racism has been loud and specific and largely indistinguishable from the homophobia in terms of the harm it causes. Let us name what is actually happening in corners of the fandom. Some of the people expressing outrage about the Michael to Michaela change are genuinely mourning a beloved book story. Some are genuinely concerned about queer representation being handled well. And some, a significant number, are using those legitimate grievances as cover for something uglier. Some of the anger is not about the gender swap at all. It is about the fact that a dark-skinned black woman is the romantic lead. The hashtag Not My Michaela discourse mirrors the hashtag Not My Duke discourse when Regé-Jean Page was cast as Simon. The language used is almost identical, and Masali Baduza will carry that. Because she is playing a character who is both gender-bent and queer, she is a target for homophobia, racism, and colorism simultaneously. 3 forms of hostility layered on top of one another. And the track record of this show's production team, when it comes to protecting its black actors from the specific and documented cruelty they face from parts of this fandom, is not good. Let us be specific about what that track record is. Fans objected to a black man playing a character who was white in the books. Netflix did not acknowledge the racist responses. Page's promotion focused relentlessly on the positive, and he was left to navigate the hostility largely without public institutional backing. After Page left the show following Season 1, a decision he had agreed to before the first season even aired because he had only signed a 1-series deal, parts of the fandom called him ungrateful. After Page left, he posted to Instagram in 2022 in support of the Rings of Power cast, who were facing racist abuse directed at their actors of color. He wrote, "I can't believe we went through an entire era where production were happy to stand by, tell us it was our own problem, and refused to stand up to racist abuse because it was coming from fans." Fans understood it as a reference to his Bridgerton experience. The production team said nothing. Ruby Barker, who played Marina Thompson in seasons 1 and 2, later revealed in an interview with Oxford University's Loaf podcast that she had experienced 2 psychotic breaks connected to her time on the show. One in 2019, directly after season 1 wrapped, and a second in 2022. She was hospitalized. Her mental health was deteriorating during filming, she said, worsened by the isolated, ostracized nature of her character. And she said,
"But not a single person from Netflix, not a single person from Shondaland, since I have had 2 psychotic breaks from that show, have even contacted me or emailed me to ask me if I'm okay, or asked me if I would benefit from any sort of aftercare or support." Right? Nobody.
She described feeling like there was a metaphorical gun to her head to promote a show that was bubbly and fun while she was in crisis, because she feared that speaking the truth would cost her career. Neither Netflix nor Shondaland responded publicly to Barker's statement. Part 7, Season 4 and the Benedict Question. Season 4 finally gave Benedict his story, adapting An Offer from a Gentleman with the character Sophie Beckett transformed into Sophie Baek, played by Korean-Australian actress Yerin Ha. The Cinderella framework of the book was largely preserved, and the creative team made a number of changes that genuinely improved on the source material. In the book, Sophie is sexually assaulted by a character named Philip Cavender. On screen, the attack is redirected so that Sophie comes to the rescue of another maid, giving her a more heroic role. Whether the intent was to spare the character trauma or to give her more agency, the effect is meaningful. A show that regularly centers the autonomy and desire of women made a deliberate choice to give its heroine something to fight for rather than a violation to recover from. The show also gave Benedict a queer identity, something that does not exist in the books. Over multiple seasons, the television Benedict had been shown in intimate situations with men and women, exploring a pansexual identity. Season 4 brought this to a formal moment where Benedict comes out to Sophie. Sophie's immediate and uncomplicated acceptance was, in the context of the show's Regency setting, an act of deliberate optimism. Showrunner Jess Brownell described this as intentional groundwork for Francesca's season. If Benedict's sexuality has been explored and accepted within the family, then Francesca's relationship with Michaela can exist within a family that already has language for difference, already has a sibling who has walked a similar path. It is elegant storytelling architecture. And it is worth acknowledging that the show has been doing this consistently, seeding future stories across multiple seasons so that the emotional ground is prepared before the central couple arrives. However, Season 4 also continued the pattern, with Yerin Ha's Sophie Baek receiving limited solo promotional investment compared to what had been afforded to the white leads preceding her. Season 4 also introduced a new Lady Whistledown, a mystery figure who takes up the pen after Penelope retires. This is entirely invented for the show. In the books, Whistledown ends with Penelope. The showrunners made the call that the show's most beloved narrative engine could not simply be switched off. Whether that instinct was right will depend on what they do with the new Whistledown in Season 5. But the decision was made from a position of practical story logic rather than slavish fidelity to the books, and that is honestly how good television adaptations should work. Part 8. What are adaptations actually for? Here's the question that sits underneath all of these specific debates. What is a television adaptation actually obligated to do? The answer depends on who you ask, and every answer contains a partial truth. If you are a book fan, the answer is often, honor what we love about the source. Do not take what was on the page and replace it with something unrecognizable. The characters, the relationships, the emotional beats we came to for, those are what we signed up for. If you are a showrunner adapting 8 novels across what could be a decade of television, the answer is, I am making a show for an audience of millions, most of whom have never read the books. I am making it for people who did not see themselves in romance for decades. I am building something that can last. That means changing things. If you are a queer viewer, or a viewer of color, or both, the answer might be, the books were never written for me to begin with. The adaptations that make room for me are the ones doing the work that the originals could not or did not do. Do not ask me to defend the exclusions of a text I never appeared in. None of these positions is wrong. All of them are incomplete. The most honest version of the Bridgerton situation is this. The show has made changes that expanded who the story is for. Those changes have had costs, and the costs have not been evenly distributed. The book fans who feel their specific stories have been altered carry a real loss. The LGBTQ+ audience that is being asked to finally see themselves in this world carry a real gain, and the BIPOC cast and crew who have operated within a production that markets diversity without consistently protecting the people who embody it, they carry a burden that neither of the other groups is being asked to carry at all. Bridgerton is, at its core, a show about happy endings. Every sibling gets their love. Every couple overcomes the obstacles in their way. The tone is fundamentally optimistic. That optimism is the show's great gift and its most persistent blind spot. Because optimism is not the same as accountability. And a show that promises a happily ever after to everyone within its fiction still has to reckon with what it offers to the real people who make it possible. Season 5 is currently in production. Hannah Dodd as Francesca, Masali Baduza as Michaela. 8 episodes. Netflix's official description: 2 years after Francesca loses her husband John, she decides to re-enter the marriage mart for practical reasons until Michaela's unexpected return to London forces her to question everything. Jess Brownell has promised queer joy, not queer trauma. She has promised that the difficulties in this season will be the same kind of difficulties every Bridgerton couple faces: structural, social, familial, not the specific grinding pain of being made to suffer for the crime of loving the wrong person. That promise is important. The most damaging thing the show could do to Francesca and Michaela's story is to use their queerness as the source of their obstacle rather than as simply a fact of who they are. But beyond the narrative of the season itself, there is a more immediate obligation. Masali Baduza is going to face racist and homophobic harassment from sections of this fandom when Season 5 releases. That is not a prediction. It is an observable pattern based on what has happened to every actor of color who has joined this cast as a romantic lead. And when that harassment comes, the production team has a job to do. A job they have already started with the release of a statement regarding the coming season. Getting this right is not optional. It is the minimum that the show owes to its own stated values. Bridgerton has built its brand on inclusivity. It has sold that inclusivity to brands, to audiences, to press coverage. If it is going to claim inclusion as a value, it has to defend the people who make that inclusion possible. Bridgerton is not a perfect show. It never was. Julia Quinn's books were not perfect either. Romance as a genre has never been perfect. It has been historically a genre that told certain kinds of people their love was worth telling stories about and told others, quietly, that it was not. What Bridgerton does at its best is refuse that hierarchy. It says that the Duke of Hastings can be black and devastatingly romantic, that Kate Sharma can be a South Asian woman and the protagonist of a sweeping Regency love story, that Benedict Bridgerton can be pansexual and still find his happily ever after, that Francesca, quiet and overlooked and always a little on the outside of her own family's narrative, might fall in love with a woman, and that the show will stand behind that love as completely as it stands behind every love that came before. That is worth something, that is worth a lot, and it coexists with legitimate questions about which actors are protected and which are left to absorb the harm, about whether the promotional machinery of a billion-dollar franchise is as committed to its leads of color as it is to its white ones, about whether a show that says it is for everyone is actually treating everyone equally, on screen and behind it. Bridgerton Season 5 is coming. Francesca and Michaela are the leads. The show that promised a happily ever after for everyone is now being asked to deliver one for a couple the books never imagined. I, for one, am watching